Hello, and thank you for your interest in the galaxy view of USBC constellations. I'm Amelia Pasmythe. I'm currently serving as the Interim Executive Director of the USBC, and I'll be joined in this presentation by several of the constellation stewards that are leading different collaborative groups. At the USBC, we've created a structure to hold the collaborative work that when we bring together various stakeholders around topics of interest to the field of lactation. The chart that you're seeing on this slide is the constellation formation pathway. It's our logic model that describes the progression of collaborative groups as they come together for shared learning activities, determine whether or not there is a real need for collaborative action. If so, what their priority strategies are, the way that they'll apply an equity lens to their work, the way that they want to engage in advocacy, and other essential working agreements, such as how they'll come to consensus and what they'll do in the event of any conflict that arises. As they formalize, moving across the indicators in this logic model, they can come to a point where they are formally affiliated with USBC and negotiate working agreements called a terms of reference with USBC to clarify the backbone supports that they would like for us to provide for their collaborative group. When there is a steward of a group, that is the organization that is helping to convene the conversation around a given topic. As you'll see in the rest of this presentation, there are cases where USBC serves as the steward, and there are cases where other organizations serve as the steward and USBC provides support to them. Of course, nothing exists in a vacuum, and that includes national organizations that are comprised of national and state organizations that are comprised of passionate people who care about our united purpose of supporting breastfeeding families across the country. But when there are external factors as big as elections, of course, that touches everyone and all of our work. So we've been on the journey of developing the constellation model and supporting topics of stakeholders coming together. And we were at a point pre-election where we were checking in with all the stakeholder and member organizations, following up on engagement surveys to make sure we understood the interest of all connected organizations, and we were planning to bring all constellation topics together for a strong fourth quarter of 2016. Immediately after the election, of course, we needed to pivot all of our attention to the policy landscape changes that were unfolding before us. In particular, we were interested in convening conversations related to the Affordable Care Act Big Three. These were Workplace Support Constellation, the Lactation Support Provider Constellation, and the Steward of the Maternity Care Practices Emerging Constellation. Out of those conversations and other efforts underway to be carefully monitoring the unfolding congressional situation, we developed a comprehensive Welcome Congress petition and asks drawn from all of the constellation topics. And we were very excited that we were able to deliver these to every congressional office at the start of 2017. It's been a very long year, but we're excited to be here with you and to be picking the momentum back up for all the constellation collaborative groups. Across 2017, we saw multiple key landscape updates across the last year and across the last topic. These also included shifts in funding and the capacity identified for several of the organizations that had previously volunteered to be stewards of emerging constellations. We've also been engaged in a new round of engagement surveys because we recognize that so many of the organizations in the field have had shifts, again, related to funding or related to capacity. So when we take this all together, it means that it's time to reinvigorate the incubation conversations. This is the point in that constellation formation pathway logic model where groups can come together and just check out what's going on, share what it is that they know, where their interests are, and see if it's time to start formalizing a group and taking action together. We will also be looking ahead carefully at funding and advocacy opportunities coming into the new year, and we'll be weighing the urgency of topics and planning accordingly so that the highest priority topics have the support to meet and have incubation conversations just as soon as possible. Thank you. In a moment, we're excited to share updates from the 4 most developed constellations, including bringing in the voices of our external stewards and the USBC staff stewards. For this slide, however, I wanted to take a moment and share some of the key topics in the breastfeeding landscape and where we see them to be in terms of the development and formalization as a group. We have some topics that are still in a learning community stage. This means that in open forums on our website, people who are interested in those topics can come together, upload materials, download materials, be networking together. If they get to a place where they're ready to have incubation conversations, we can convene them if that's desirable and help support a conversation to see if there's energy and momentum to formalize and move ahead. And then we have some topics that are emerging constellations. You'll note here that some of these topics have stars beside them. That's to note the topics that we believe are highest priority to have some support in convening. You'll also see the arrows. Those are 2 topics that previously had steward organizations that were ready to move forward and now have had some shifts. And so we're looking for new stewards if that's warranted once we convene the incubation conversations.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Lebetovich, and I'm the Senior Workplace Program Manager and Policy Analyst here at USBC, and I serve as steward for the Workplace Support Constellation. The Workplace Support Constellation dreams of a time when every breastfeeding employee has access to the workplace support she needs. The constellation currently has 23 participating organizations and has identified 2 priority strategies for our work together. The first is to increase understanding of employer responsibilities and employee rights under federal and state law. And the second is to identify gaps in the current laws and work to expand protections for all employees. We have met throughout 2016 and 2017, in addition to maintaining written communication between our constellation meetings. And our work together has really begun to pick up speed. In 2016, we were joined by staff from the U.S. Department of Labor and the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to discuss and share valuable insight on the highest priority topics to address, the highest priority audiences for targeted information, and other key considerations. This was really great because each of these agencies is responsible for enforcement of a federal law that impacts breastfeeding employees. Then in late 2016, we had to shift our focus. The Federal Break Time for Nursing Mothers Law, which requires employers to provide break time and a private non-bathroom space for some employees to pump during the workday, was passed into law as part of the Affordable Care Act. So late 2016 and early 2017 were consumed with monitoring and responding to the potential impact of an ACA repeal on the workplace provision. Luckily, this provision was not targeted for repeal and was not subject to repeal via budget reconciliation, which was the mechanism that Congress was attempting to use. Turning back to our priority strategies over the summer of 2017, the USBC and Center for Work-Life Law teamed up with the U.S. Department of Labor and the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to host a webinar on workplace breastfeeding law. This webinar included the launch of state guides to the rights of breastfeeding employees. This was an enormous project bringing together federal and state enforcing agencies, state breastfeeding coalitions, and national experts to develop an inventory and analysis of the intersection of federal and state workplace breastfeeding law. We also dedicated significant time to developing the Constellation's terms of reference in order to build a strong foundation for our work together. This included significant time spent developing a working statement on the Workplace Support Constellation racial equity approach. There has been a lot of attention to developing a shared understanding of the landscape of breastfeeding employees and figuring out how we can support meaningful engagement so that those who are impacted by the work of the Constellation have a voice. There's particular energy around the idea of developing an advisory committee made up of breastfeeding moms and industry experts, and we'll soon form a subgroup to continue consideration of how we can move this forward. An exciting development this year was that the Constellation articulated the decision to consider support and accommodations for breastfeeding students to fall within the scope of this Constellation. So this year, we'll also be building listservs within our online workspace that are specifically focused on the needs of students. We've also begun planning for an exciting new Constellation activity to launch a webinar series on workplace breastfeeding law. Our hope is that this will include up to 8 webinars, with one general webinar targeted to healthcare providers and the remaining webinars designed to be industry specific. So really targeting the industries where breastfeeding employees face the greatest barriers to combining breastfeeding and employment. The Constellation is also preparing to launch the Associated Workplace Support Community of Practice. So this would create a space for advocates, law implementation stakeholders like state level agencies and coalitions, and any other interested state partners to come together, share, network, and take collective action. And to support early momentum and energy, we're planning to launch the community of practice in coordination with some of these other Constellation activities like the webinar series. And of course, the Constellation is focused on expanding existing protections for breastfeeding employees. Constellation participants have worked together to request additional guidance on the break time law, fight for passage of the Supporting Working Moms Act, which would extend existing accommodation requirements to many salaried employees, and of course, dream big about how to move forward toward ensuring legal protections for every single breastfeeding employee in the United States. We have a lot of work ahead of us and a lot of energy, and we're looking forward to a great 2018. Thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Spees, and I'm the Constellation Program Manager with USBC. And I have a special emphasis on supporting the work of the Lactation Support Providers Constellation, along with Amelia Pisnite and our facilitator, Kimberly Broomfield-Massey. This constellation is in Pathway Stage 4, which means that they are a USBC-affiliated constellation. And this reflects the fact that organizations in the constellation have been working together for over 3 years to develop common goals and strategies. The Lactation Support Provider Constellation had a few exciting developments in 2017. First of all, they welcomed 2 new member organizations, Mom to Mom Global and the Carolina Global Breastfeeding Institute. Secondly, they were able to convene an in-person meeting in November 2017, and it was a great opportunity for the group to spend 2 days together to revisit their equity, advocacy, and decision-making approaches, which informed the Terms of Reference document. The group also began to articulate new priority strategies, and their next steps will be to continue to develop and refine what these strategies will mean for their work plan for the coming years. This meeting also took a really different approach than past meetings have, and the focus was to center equity and a commitment to working through discomforts and tough conversations in real time, which allowed for a great deal of connection and growth within the group. And lactation support providers are different, but they all bring value to the field and contribute meaningfully to the conversation. And this meeting really allowed for everybody to hold that truth.
"2017 was a challenging year. So much political unrest and divisions in our country. At the same time, a lot of events that brought us closer together and more clarified than ever about the priorities that are going to support the families that we care about. 2018 is here. We are full of vim and vision and interest in working with you. We're conducting listening sessions with our members, partners, coalitions, and other stakeholders, learning where USBC brings value to you, and identifying what will keep you at the table. We're here to be connecting, collaborating, and eventually constellating together. Thank you.